I'm Charles Gueli. I'm currently the president of the Mattituck-Laurel Civic Association. And prior to COVID, we used to have interviews with important people around the community for our YouTube page. And we had to discontinue that during COVID. And we're very happy to resume that program with Suffolk County Legislator for the First District, Al Krupski. Welcome.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate the opportunity.
We're going to just ask a few questions, maybe take 15, 20 minutes, and then it will be finished. Please describe the programs that Suffolk County has put into place that have benefited Southold Town while you've been a county legislator.
Well, there was one that we were just talking about, the Gueli Airport Citizens Advisory Board, and that was put in place by Legislator Fleming in response to the possible shutdown of East Hampton Airport. So people were very concerned. Gueli is a county-owned airport. It's in West Hampton. It's used, but it's not overly used, and people were very concerned with Amazon building a huge warehouse there that they would try to get onto the runway and bring cargo in. So that was a big concern to me. I put in legislation at the same time, like a parallel track, because trying to make sure that the only way they could bring cargo in was if the airport changed its designation. The only way the airport could change its designation is if a county executive directed the runway or the airport manager to file with the FAA to change the designation. So it put it all in the county executive's hands. So my legislation provided a more of a belt and suspenders approach. It has to, any kind of filing for a change in designation of use has to go through the county legislature also before it can be, we can approach the FAA. That was the most we could do. We couldn't, because the airport does take a lot of federal money, and we're currently in the process of rebuilding the control tower there. That's the best we could do. So
I see. Any other programs?
Yeah, I've been very active with all the dredging. The county dredge, it's in the charter. The county does the dredging for the East End and Peconic Bay, and so I've been very active making sure that program's fully funded and fully staffed. And as far as public safety goes, we passed the school bus camera bill a number of years ago, and then there was a question of where would the revenues go. The towns reached out to me and said, we're gonna get some of the revenues, most of the revenues are not gonna stay in the town, they're gonna go west. So I was able to pass a bill. It took 8 months. There was a lot of discussion on how to spend the money. In the end, the money will go towards public safety in the towns where the infraction took place. So that was a big win.
What's coming up regarding the appropriation for farmland preservation?
So the county has a dedicated source for land preservation, including farmland, and it's from the 0.25% drinking money. So about 25% of that is dedicated towards land preservation. What the county did years ago is they borrowed heavily against future revenues. So right now, when I started, and up till now, 11 years, 2/3 of the money that comes in that's dedicated to land preservation goes to debt service. So there's only a small portion for land preservation, both open space, whether it's like active parkland or passive parkland or waterfront access or land preservation for farmland. There's very little to go around. So I appealed to the county executive, when our finances improved 2 years ago, thanks to COVID, the county's finances really dramatically improved. And we paid off a lot of old debt. I said, look, this is the time to retire the debt on the land preservation. Let's use that money. So that what was offered instead was that it was $100 million in bonded money for farmland preservation. But it's metered out $10 million every year, but it has to go into the capital program and budget, and then we have to appropriate it. So right now, it went in the capital budget, and I chaired the capital budget for a number of years. It went in the capital budget, and it went through committee on Monday, and hopefully the full legislature on next Tuesday, and we'll appropriate that $10 million for farmland preservation.
Yeah, that would be very good. That would be very popular with the citizens here in Southold. The North Fork Civics Coalition sent out a survey which got responses of about 1,029, I believe. And the top item that everybody was concerned about by far was preservation of land.
It's so important. It's such a big impact today. It impacts traffic and all the services that aren't needed, and it keeps the taxes low. And when you preserve farmland, it's still in private ownership. And it's great to preserve open space, but then it becomes a management issue. So it's really important to keep those programs funded.
Mm. What do you think about the program for the enhanced septic systems?
So I worked on that from the very beginning. The county executive, when I started, he said water quality was his #1 issue. And we've got 360,000 septic systems in Suffolk County. And they're all putting their waste directly into the ground, into our drinking water. So he wanted to do something about it. Part of the county's sewered, and some of the problem with that is the treated wastewater goes into the big sewage treatment plant, goes into the ocean. So you're taking all that fresh water and you dump it overboard. So they're losing that fresh water for their aquifer. There's about 180 sewage treatment plants in Suffolk County. And there's a lot going on. So most of those are groundwater recharge. So at least the treated wastewater goes back into the ground. But what do you do with that wastewater? And it not only has what we put into it, but you think about the pharmaceuticals that go through people's bodies, and you think about all the cleaners and household products, personal care products that go down the drain. All that ends up in your drinking water. So I got involved with a process at the very beginning, working with the health department and the Department of Public Works and Economic Development and Planning. And I said, look, we need to include the towns and villages, because they're the ones, because a lot of the land use in Suffolk County was determined by wastewater flow. So I was very concerned, if the wastewater now is cleaner, are they gonna try to push to get more development, because now the wastewater is cleaner? Just like when you sewer an area, they want more development now because it's sewered. So I was able to put a line in the new Article 19 of the Health Code that this is not intended to increase density. And I was complimented that by people who said that's exactly what would have happened. Mm-hmm. They would have increased density based on that. So I've been active with the wastewater from the beginning, and I made sure that the Southold town's been very active at the table during all those internal talks.
And it's pretty common knowledge that nitrogen has been a problem as far as the surface water.
Yes.
Do you think, in your opinion, do you think that nitrogen use should be restricted by local government?
It's sort of a problem. So they said most of the problem is actually coming from septic systems. That's the greatest problem. I mean, so the town has been doing a great job as far as runoff, so people's lawns, fertilizer. And the agricultural community has been changing for decades, trying to minimize the amount of nitrogen they use, because it's an economic thing, but also they want to do the right thing environmentally. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of good partners, Suffolk County Soil and Water Conservation District, which I'm a board member, Cornell Cooperative Extension, all work as partners with agriculture to try to improve their practices.
Great. Different topic. Suffolk County owns a large parcel of wooded land on Aldridge Road, and it heads east from there. And are there any plans for enhancing that property or creating? I know it has a few walking trails in it, I believe. Any other developments going on there?
There's no, as far as I know, there's no plans for that. Suffolk County owns about 60,000 acres of parkland. So that's just part of the whole inventory. And the challenge with that much parkland is managing it and everything. So the town has been a great partner, not only in helping to preserve it, partnering with a purchase price, but also partnering as a managing entity. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a big help to the county, so they don't have the responsibilities of making trails and keeping the parking lot maintained and all that.
Good. term limits have recently been imposed for Suffolk County elected officials. How did this come about, and are you in favor of it?
So the term limits, when I started, they were already in place. It's a 2-year term, and you got 12 years as Suffolk County legislator. And then whoever wrote the law, and I don't know if they did it intentionally or not, but it was unclear to a judge afterwards that if you served 12 consecutive years, that you couldn't take a year off and serve again. So we passed a law clarifying that. Plus, the other wrinkle was that I started in a special election, so there's I think 4 or 5 legislators who started in a special election midterm. So that extra time isn't counted towards the 12 years. We had to clarify that legally. Because otherwise you just have, if it was 12 years, then you'd have special election after special election. It would kind of be pointless. So we cleaned that up. And I think it's good. The 12-year term at the county level, I think it's good. We've seen a good turnover of new people. And not everyone stays the full 12 years because people move on to other opportunities. So it's an interesting form of government.
Are you in favor of term limits, generally speaking?
Not really at the town level. I would be more at the state level, and longer terms than 2 years. I think the 2-year term is a problem. I really do. I think a 4-year term is much better for an elected office.
Is there anything else that you would like to see happen before you leave office?
Well, we're working on a number of things, but mostly smaller projects. But one of the bigger ones is this food waste problem, and that plagues the whole island. You know, that's not local. That's an island-wide issue, and there's so much food waste. Working with the ag community, working with Cornell Cooperative Extension, trying to get maybe some of it could be composted on farms, and certainly. So the question is, should it obviously you could start in your backyard and compost your own food waste. You could do it really locally, maybe do it at the town level, or do you do a more regional approach with a much larger program? But shipping it off the island isn't sustainable. You know, you're shipping it where, and how much longer are those people going to take it, and what's the cost of shipping it? So when you consider all those things, we need to do something with our food waste on the island, and consider that with the Suffolk County Soil and Water Conservation District, we actually bought 2 manure spreaders, and they're available to growers. So it's a machine that if you have a farm, especially a small farm, and you're doing on-farm composting, you really need that piece of equipment like 1, maybe 2 days a year. So you're not gonna buy that, so you're not gonna compost. But if you have use of that machine, it'll encourage you to compost. It's all about, you know, improving soil health at that point. When you spread that organic matter into your soil, and then you're not taking it somewhere else, so you're using it here, you're benefiting your soil, and the machine's available, you know, free of charge to any grower. You know, they have to go through the office and schedule it.
I know the people that run the drawdown project.
Very impressive group.
Yeah.
And they are, I worked with them, with the DEC in my office. It was pre-COVID to try to get a pilot in Southold on this. And so DEC is the regulatory partner. So we're working with them to try to get them to be a good partner. Because it has to work. It's a complicated thing, taking your food waste somewhere. It becomes kind of complicated, and how it's being handled, and then how it's being composted. So there's some logistics to figure out. Oh, and the other thing would be water conservation. So that's another big issue that we're working on countywide, and I do participate in the LINAP, the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection. And part of that, and I'm part of the conservation subgroup, and a lot of it's run by water purveyors, but also on it, it's a mix of people that are on it also, and they're very concerned about water use and water conservation. So how do we do a better job of, obviously if you want to save a resource, the first thing you do is conserve your use, and then figure out how to use it best. So I can't say there's been a lot of progress made on that, because a lot of the problem is lawn irrigation during the summer. And all the water purveyors show that very clearly in their graphs, how the water use spikes up in the summertime, and they can't handle the volume, because 20 years ago, very few people had lawn sprinklers. So everything's changed in time, and that kind of volume of water, it's hard to produce that amount, and they're treating it to drinkable standards. It was hard to produce that kind of water and have it instantly available. So, and that's changed a lot.
Shifting over to commercial development, most of the population, and my feeling is we just as soon not have any further commercial development, but there's a segment of the population that says, well, only 2% of the available land is zoned commercial, and that it should all be developed because that creates jobs and has other economic benefits. Where do you stand on that?
So that big block of land in Petro was zoned before I was on the town board, and I think the idea was to try to contain commercial development, to not have residential development around the dump, so kind of buffer the dump from residential. But it depends on what kind of commercial. I mean, you do need commercial development. You do need people to work in town. There's a lot of, it's funny, people drive out here and they don't think there's any economy because it looks so nice and clean, but there's a lot of economy out here, and there's a lot of things that need fixing, and you need people to fix things and to move things around, and if it's coordinated and done right, and it's environmentally safe.
There's a lot going on now regarding hotels. You think hotels are a benefit moving forward?
The town, so I started with a comprehensive plan, and it took a long time for the town to do it because they really did it through a community-based approach. So if it's zoned for it, that's the zoning that needs to be considered, and what the town has to do is really say, if people are alarmed about hotels, you better go through the town zoning and say where they're allowed by law, and then say, is that appropriate there? What does full build out look like? And obviously you have to consider traffic impacts, because that's the biggest thing when a lot of the development that I've seen elsewhere is they don't consider traffic impacts at all. So that's obviously something that has to be realistically considered.
Yeah, and I've heard people say also that each project is looked at individually, but nobody seems to be looking at the overall impact of all the projects that are being passed through the town.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. You have to look at the whole code and say, how is this gonna, if they're all built out, what's that gonna look like?
Mm-hmm. Okay, every hamlet now, except possibly Greenport Village, and I think they're working on a civic association, but every other hamlet in South Old Town has a civic association now. And the civic associations want to help town get through the implementation process of the comprehensive plan. How do you think the civics can best do that?
So I think the civics are doing a great job, because if you don't have community input, as an elected official, you only know what you know. So you get community input, and then you raise the level of discussion on one issue, and then other people from around town can weigh in on that, and how does it affect their hamlets? And you get a better view of what the issue is. So you really have to raise community awareness. It's very helpful, and it's very helpful, that kind of guidance for elected officials. It is, because, and then Ben Franklin said the law is like too much bread and too little butter. So you always have to keep working forward, and the comprehensive plan is a great document, but you always have to keep moving forward and saying, is that really gonna address, who knew some of these issues that came up in the last 10 years would ever come up? So you have to stay on, and if you can stay on top of it and ahead of it, kind of like the airport issue at Zabreski, if you stay one step ahead of it, you don't have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, thank you. This is great.